Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I have a card for you guys for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, which I will have linked on my blog. I was inspired by the picture that inspired the colors of the challenge, which is pretty normal for me. So I used some Strathmore cold press 140 pound ready cut watercolor paper, which I am absolutely loving this stuff. I don't know, it's a total game changer. So I used my anti-static powder tool on it first. That just keeps the embossing powder from sticking to anything but the stamped image. And then I'm inking up my favorite things abstract background stamp. I inked it up with Versamark ink, and then I pressed the watercolor paper down onto the stamp really well. And then I'm coating it with some detail white embossing powder and holding that over a coffee filter. It's just so much easier to funnel the powder back into the container using a coffee filter. That's like been my go-to for eons. So coated all the areas, the stamped areas, with that embossing powder, and then heated it with my heat tool. Made sure to get my heat tool really hot before I brought it to the paper so that I could melt all the embossing powder. And once you get to this stage, it's really hard to see, like on camera and in real life. But got it all melted, and then I'm using just 2 markers for this background. I'm using my Zig Real Brush Clean Color markers, and I'm using turquoise green for the first part, and then I'll end up using mid green for the second. And as always, experimenting. Wasn't sure how much marker I was going to need, how I was going to color in each area. I knew I wanted to watercolor, hence me using the watercolor paper. So I started off with coloring, either one edge of each of these areas or 2 sometimes. And then down the road, I started doing it where I was just using whatever color was left on my little water brush. And that's where I got the lighter areas. So no rhyme or reason. I'm just going randomly. It's kind of the nice thing too with a background like this is you can kind of do whatever you want. So I super sped it up. I just sat and did this while I was watching a movie with my kids here, and did all of the turquoisey color areas first because it was just quick and simple. And yeah, I'm just using a water brush. No fancy brushes are needed or anything. And just pulling in the color, and I wanted more turquoise than green, so I wasn't counting or anything, but I just filled in more areas with the turquoise and left fewer areas for the green to be used. And sometimes ended up filling in even more areas because if I did go over the edge with the marker, sometimes I'd pull a turquoise over, or sometimes I'd fix that later with the green. So super sped this up because it's nothing fancy, but I do love how you kind of get this really cool dimensional effect with the markers and the lines and everything else. I am really loving this watercolor paper with these markers because it's a lot easier to move the color around and you don't end up with those harsh lines. So once I was done with all that, I'd actually let it sit and air dry. It didn't take that long, but it was super late when I was up doing this with the kids. So once everyone went to bed, I went to bed, and then I'm working on this the next day. So I die cut that watercolor piece with the largest die from the My Favorite Things Blueprints 1 dynamic set. And then I die cut the word happy several times from some white cardstock, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then I decided I wanted to add just a little bit of bling, nothing too crazy. So I have my Pretty Pink Posh, the little iridescent stars. So I just added a few little dabs of Ranger's Multimedia Matte Adhesive to this, and then I just poured the stars over top and then pressed down in the areas I knew where I had the adhesive, just to see how this would work, because these are like really tiny. I've seen other videos by other designers doing something similar, so that kind of worked. The stars stuck to those areas with adhesive, and then I just knocked off the excess ones. So you could either do it that way, or when you're only doing like a few like this, you could just place them, like put each little dab just like I do normal sequins. So either way works with these, in my opinion. So let that sit aside to dry for a minute or 2 while I adhere. I adhered all of these happy die cuts. I die cut it 3 times, so I adhered them as well with the multi-medium matte adhesive. And while I was doing it, I was thinking of making them shimmery, and instead I pulled out my, this is the Kirarina, I think that's how you pronounce it, Wink marker. I'd shown this in a haul a while ago. This is the white pearl one, so it's not shimmery, and you can't see it in the video, and you can't really see it on the pictures, but it just gives it that kind of pearl sort of a look. So really, really pretty. This shows up really nicely on dark cardstock, but it's kind of a nice way just to give us a little extra something so it's not completely flat white cardstock. It's just got that little extra something. So I just quickly scribbled on the entire die cut with that. And then to finish off the sentiment, I have the MFT Happy sentiment set, and I just coated some vellum with some anti-static powder again, and then I stamped the remainder part of the sentiment with Versamark ink as well, and then coated that with the same detail white embossing powder, and then quickly hit that with my heat tool on vellum. It takes literally seconds to melt all that, and you don't want to overheat it because vellum will warp really easily. And then I trimmed that into just a really thin strip, so it's just the sentiment. And I'm going to wrap that around this watercolor panel here. Once I've got it wrapped around, I'm going to grab my Scotch tape. I've got my big old heavy dispenser for it. So tape those down, and then I'm going to adhere the sentiment, but I'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to quickly score my card base. So it's a 4 1/4 by 11 inch heavyweight white cardstock. And I scored that at 5 1/2 inch. So it's going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And then I'm going to add the same multimedia matte adhesive to my sentiment. And I'm going to adhere that to the card panel. And I decided to kind of slide it right under the vellum sentiment just to kind of make everything work better. So once I did that, I actually set this aside and put the tape dispenser right on top of it to hold that, down while the glue dried. And then to finish off the inside, I actually die cut the happy again from a scrap of the same watercolor paper and just took my markers and watercolored it and just kind of blended the colors in together with my water brush. Really simple, nothing too fancy, really, really easy to do. I could have watercolored just the cardstock and then die cut it afterward. But I wanted to try it this way just to give more of the dimension and the look of like the markers, the dark areas of the markers right on the word die cut. So I set that aside to dry, and then once it was dry, I'm going to stamp the inside of the card with the coordinating sentiment I'd chosen with MFT's, I think this is Tropical Teal ink. Sorry, I'm like leaning back and grabbing it. Yes, I was right. Tropical Teal ink. And then I'm going to adhere that sentiment with the same multimedia matte adhesive. And then I thought about popping up the watercolor panel on foam tape because, that's what I always do. But I thought this time I'll keep it a little flatter. So I just used my Scotch tape and applied a generous amount of my ATG adhesive there and adhered that to my card base, and that's all there was to it. So as always, I will have a link below the video in the description box. There will be a link to my blog post with links to the color challenge. There will be links to all the supplies used, my Facebook page, all that kind of stuff is always in the description box below the video. So please check that out if you're interested. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.